Hey gamers, Maniac here with GameAccess.net doing my new site podcast, and keeping with the old school themes that many people have asked me to stay with, we're going to be doing probably one of the oldest properties that I can think of. We're going to be talking about Mario. Yes, probably the grandfather of us all. Mario was originally designed to be a little mustached man in overalls with a hat. He was created by Shigeru Miyamoto. And I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I believe his first appearance was in Donkey Kong, where he was referred to as the Jumpman. But he later on ended up in some of his own arcade games by himself. He was, of course, I believe, in the Donkey Kong, the later Donkey Kong games, where he was actually the villain and Donkey Kong Jr. was the hero. But there was also, of course, the Mario Brothers arcade game. But I want to kind of start off a little bit with probably the game that we all remember, Super Mario Brothers for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Or, for you Japanese, the Famicom. What can I say about this system? What can I say about this game? What can I say about anything involving this? I'm really tackling the stuff of legends here. You cannot have thrown a rock in the last 40 years and come across a property that has been more enduring, more beloved, and has had more traction than Mario. You just can't. He is infinitely moldable, bendable, usable, in fact, jumpable. He can work in pretty much any type of action area that you throw him into. I mean, he's been in comic books, he's been in video games, movies, animated shows, television shows. You just can't get something that was made in the last 30 years and has achieved this level of success, because I can't think of anything else. Certainly, I can think of some game properties that have come more recently and have been kind of popular, and I can think of ones that are much older, but hasn't had the sticking power. Mario is a legend, and I kind of held off talking about him because he wasn't really he was never a PC property. I mean, this was you can't get more, this is the console guy. And when I was doing the old school stuff, everybody wanted me to stick with the PC. But recently on my site, GameAccess.net, I hosted a Mario weekend. And the reason why was because I was doing a lot of research on the Wii U, and I was constantly being pointed and directed to a whole lot of just classic Mario material. Whether it be more recent or whether it be older stuff, fan-made stuff, reviews, previews, all kinds of different Mario stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I've dedicated days to the site in the past. I think the first one I ever dedicated was, Alan Wake Day, back before Alan Wake's American Nightmare came out. I also recently, before Halloween, did a Silent Hill Day. I even think I probably did like a Metroid Day when I was doing like a Metroid thing about a year ago, maybe two. But I don't know, I just had a blast with Mario Weekend, and I thought it was perfect timing because the Wii U had come out. And while I was doing Mario Weekend, I was also preparing for a lot of the stuff that would come out for the Wii Weekend. It was basically giving me the opportunity to just showcase to you guys a lot of the favorite stuff that I had come up with over the course of my research, while also giving me some time to prepare for the Wii U launch. I'm really happy with how everybody liked it, but I think a lot of people were kind of asking, it's like, well, why didn't you do like a Mario podcast? Well, I didn't really have the time that weekend to do one, because this does take a few hours of dedicated work, both in preparation, recording, and editing, and everything else. So I knew I wouldn't have had the time that weekend to do a Mario podcast. But since you guys asked, here it is. Let's go kind of back to the beginning a little bit, with a little bit of the history. It was a dark time after the crash of 1983 to be a gamer. Atari had busted the whole gaming industry, and pretty much the whole gaming industry had gone with it. I mean, a lot of people would basically say, well, then, Atari released E.T. and then everything went bad after E.T. E.T. single-handedly destroyed it. That's not true. E.T. was basically just the culmination of a lot of bad decisions that Atari had made up to that point. Some companies, when they're successful, they take their success as if nothing could ever go bad for them. And then they make some bad decisions. And sometimes they're so successful that making bad decisions doesn't impact them. And other times the bad decisions that they make can destroy their company. I can cite many, many things of either side, one way or the other. Companies that made bad decisions and survived, and companies that made bad decisions and lived. There's no reason for me to go on here, and I'm sure you can think of your own. But Atari really couldn't have survived this, and to be perfectly honest, because Atari was so ingrained into the gaming industry at the time, you couldn't... Atari basically, without Atari, you've got, basically there was no industry. And the bad bet that all the retailers had on Atari for the home video game systems pretty much killed retail confidence in it. The game systems weren't selling. The games could only sell, but only under very cheap. They weren't being remanufactured. There was just a surge. It basically it was like a bubble that had bursted. So, once that bubble burst, the retailers were really video game wary. They thought, okay, they tried it, it's a failure. This was back before people realized that technology got better. This was back before that. Nobody, people pretty much kind of figured at the time, you can develop new technology, but you can't really improve upon the technology that it is, and even if you did, there's really no point to it. I mean, a VCR is still going to play all the VCR tapes that it has. A toaster is going to basically toast all the toast it wants to. A television is going to show all the same boring channels. Boy. Yeah, we don't think like that anymore, because nowadays, even in buying a brand new TV, even if it's top of the line, it's not going to be top of the line for very long. New movie technology is coming out every couple of years. Internet speeds are getting faster. Computer systems and hardware is getting faster every 6 months. New handheld devices are improving every year. That was foreign. That was a foreign concept to retailers. They kind of figure, okay, you have something, and then you don't. And then it's over. It's like a fad. That's what they thought of it as, a fad. There was a Japanese toy company that manufactured playing cards. That was what they did. It was called Nintendo. The idea behind it was make some nice cards, have a retail distribution system set up, and sell. And then there was a man working for that company that said, you know what? I had this really cool idea for a toy. And just on his own volition, he took this like little prop or something like that. It was just a gag to make him laugh at work, where it was an extended arm. And he could basically open a clasp and everything, and the arm would extend and open its hand, and he would close it, and the hand would retract and close. And he called it the Ultra Hand. And the guys in charge of Nintendo took a look at this, and they said, we want to set this to resale. And because they had already had the distribution network in place from being a playing card company, they were much better off at what they could do than if they hadn't already developed that to begin with. And they created the Ultra Hand, they marketed it, and guys loved it. People loved it. It was a very cool thing. It was like this. It was something new. It was something novel, I guess. But the Ultra Hand, it took off. I guess people thought he was either quaint or cute or fun or I don't know, but it took off. And Nintendo practically overnight became a toy company. Now, fast forward, in the United States, you had a company called Atari that was making video games. Its creator, Nolan Bushnell, had become famous because he had taken the ideas that he had gotten from a man named Ralph Baer, and he said, I can do something with this. And he pretty much created his own empire, practically, with games and everything, and he sold these arcade cabinet machines, these computerized arcade cabinet machines to bars and other venues, and when the bars realized how much money that they were making off of these things in just having people play them, more people wanted more games. When everyone realized quite quickly how popular these cabinets were, everyone wanted to have their own because everyone wanted to make the profits off of them. The thing was that they were expensive to make, they were expensive to buy, but there was a market for them. You had a chance of getting your money back. How long it took was up to you. It was up to how popular the game was. But whatever you made off of that system, you were entitled to keep yourself. And practically over a course of a year or two, a video game empire was starting. Arcades were opening up everywhere. Young people were looking to spend their lunch money and stuff like that, because all it cost was a quarter. And Nintendo wanted a piece of that action. And Shigeru Miyamoto started looking into what Nintendo could do for this market, and they invented Donkey Kong. The name of Donkey came from the whole idea of Kong. I believe the term Kong just simply is a generic term for ape or gorilla or something along those lines. And from the legend I had heard, the term donkey was represented because it was supposed to mean something stupid, or I guess maybe it's similar, like you're an ass or something like that, where the animal is supposed to be is a dumb animal or something like that. So the name Donkey Kong is supposed to mean like dumb ape or dumb monkey or something along those lines. Now, I could be wrong about that, but that's the legend. That's the term. And you're going to say, well, monkeys aren't donkeys. Why wasn't it called Monkey Kong? Well, that would be like saying monkey, monkey. I don't know. So you needed a hero. You needed somebody to be a hero of this character. Now, with video game limitation the way it was, they were pretty much fixed on what this hero could be. They couldn't really render a mouth, so they just gave him a big mustache. They couldn't really make hair, so they gave him a hat. And I guess they kind of figured, well, put him in overalls. What does he do? He jumps. We'll call him the Jump Man. From what I was told, the name Mario came from their landlord or something like that. Like they had a landlord for Nintendo or something like that, or the development team had a landlord named Mario or something, and perhaps the name Mario came from a term of endearment to this particular Fix-It Man, or landlord or whatever. Makes sense. Definitely makes sense. I'm sure that many of you probably remember the Game Developers Conference short that These Aren't Muskets did, where a bunch of comedians are pretending to be game developers and they were all getting high, and while they were getting high, they're coming up with like all the history. Like Dig Dug was like originally called Digging for Truth. The man who dug his own grave was supposed to be about like the hypocrisy of Vietnam. He's like, no, too political. We'll call it Dig Dug and make it about a baby miner. Great video, by the way. If you haven't seen that, you got to look that video up. And at the very end, they see a guy like their janitor, which looks like Mario. And one of the guys says, you know what? I'm going to just stay a little bit. And the rest of them all go have a disco party. So, because I guess he wanted to get more information so he can make, the Mario game, I guess. That's not how it happens. So, fast forward, the bottom drops out of the arcade market probably around 1983. Certainly it's gone by 1984. E.T., coupled with the fact of all the other bad decisions that Atari was making, coupled with the factor of the arcade market just basically hitting a wall. I think the last major game that was single-handedly keeping up the market was probably Dragon's Lair. And the bottom certainly was falling out around the time Space Ace came out. Even the developers of that game kind of figured, look, they were working on Dragon's Lair 2 by that point, but they kind of realized that they probably maybe extended the arcade market by about 6 months at most. There was just no holding up that market by that point. So the money wasn't in the markets, and the money wasn't in the home consoles either, because none of the retailers wanted them anymore. And here was this company from Japan, like, man, we really missed out on an opportunity or something along those lines. They wanted to get a piece of that market, because when it was good for Atari, it was really good. And the consumers loved it. So there had to be some decisions to that. Years passed, and I had heard rumors that maybe Nintendo had tried approaching Atari to try to kind of get publishing rights about this, or to get, United States publishing rights through them, and maybe Atari didn't take him up on the offer because they kind of thought that there was going to be competition with copied games or something like that, or games that were similar in that respect to theirs. I don't know how true those stories are, but it was written up on one of GameSpy's articles about some of the dumbest moves in video game history. That Atari did not take up Nintendo on that offer. And Nintendo decided, you know what? Screw it. We'll do it ourselves. We will pretty much single-handedly bring back, and their intention was pretty much bring back the home market. Bring back video games, basically. Atari had switched over to computers by that point. They weren't really doing anything else. By that point, the retailers believed that there was more money in making simulations of dairy farms than there was in playing a game like, playing a game like Adventure or Pitfall or something like that. And they didn't want the video games back. The retailers were really wary about this. So Nintendo really wanted to get in on this. And it's like, no, we can prove that we have the technology, that we have improved the technology enough that we can do well in this market. In any market that we're thrown in. We can prove it. By that point, I can't really talk too much about the history of Super Mario Brothers and stuff like that, because the truth is nobody really knows when this game officially came out. Not even Nintendo knows when Super Mario Brothers officially came out. So I really can't talk too much about that. But they said, you know what, we've got a console, we've got games for it. We want to get into the United States market. And retailer didn't want anything to do with it. And they says, oh, this isn't a game system. It's a toy. It's a new toy. The kids are going to love it. And they included robots and a light gun. The Rob the Robot, of course, was part of the original, was basically an original NES pack-in thing. That's what, they needed to do that to basically get into that market. And the wise wisdom is that Nintendo of America and Nintendo of Japan were at odds about if they could hit the United States market. And Nintendo of Japan basically said, well, we'll do a test market here to see if it's viable, see if the product is viable in the United States. Because by that point, I believe it was doing pretty well in Japan. And the United States basically said, oh, that's great, we'll just take some small town or something like that, and we'll test it there, and people will see how they like it. And Nintendo Japan said, no, if you're going to do this, you're going to take New York City. That'll be our test market. If you can sell in New York City, you can sell anywhere. And I think that has some reason why we really don't know, because there really aren't really any official release dates if you did smaller absorbed releases like that. It wasn't really a day when everything, all across the country came out. It was kind of phased in kind of thing. And nobody really remembers the exact days that the game systems were phased in or hit certain markets. It wasn't like today where a game can pretty much hit worldwide release and on the same day or maybe in the same month. But you can write down exactly which day this will hit an entire market. It's not like that. It wasn't like that back then. So, to get the retailers on board, Nintendo told them, look, this is what we'll do. We will buy back any of the consoles that you don't sell. So you can sell the stuff, and we'll buy back anything you don't sell. That to retailers basically meant, well, we've got no, there's no problem. We have no problem with that because there's no, how do I put this? There's no gamble for them. They wouldn't have a gamble on that. So the retailer said okay, and the NES launched and it sold very well. They didn't sell every single console that they launched to the market, but they certainly sold enough to make Nintendo of Japan realize that they had something viable. And they went for a countrywide release of the console. I remember getting the NES probably around 1989 or 1990 or so. By that point, my cousin had a boyfriend that was a big fan of the system, had his own console and everything else. And I think I could remember seeing it in stores like Sears and stuff like that, which actually at the time was pretty good about having kind of the newest and coolest technologies like the biggest screen televisions and just cool stuff like that. And I don't know. I think I got sick or something along those lines. And I remember also seeing them in like the Sears catalog with like you'd have not just the NES console, but you'd see all the games that they had for it at the time. And what probably hit really the best for Mario was when it ended up with a Mario/Duck Hunt cart bundle, which shipped with the NES. I believe it was the Model 1 NES. I believe there were 2 Model NESs total, but that was like the Model 1 NES and the Red Zapper. So you'd get, for one purchase, you could get a Model 1 NES with 2 controllers, a Zapper, and Mario Kart and Duck Hunt on one cartridge. It was a pretty good buy. I think that at the time it was only like $89, $90 or something like that. And lo and behold, I get sick. I'm in the hospital. I get out of the hospital. My folks spring this little thing on me. I finally have my own copy of Mario, Super Mario Brothers. I was elated. I was probably the happiest kid you could possibly imagine. And then I played the game, and I was terrible at it. I still am pretty bad at it. But, yeah, that was a fun game. I still remember very fond memories of playing it and going up against Bowser. I never beat it. But here was a game that was, when it was released, it was beyond anything that Atari had seen, people had seen before. It was colorful. The sound was very good. It was bright. It was chipper. It was cute. But it was also fun. The gameplay was a lot of fun. It was a great game. You jump on turtle shells and fire them. You could have power-ups and stuff like that. You'd be navigating fun areas. Some of the castles were like mazes. Some of the enemies would throw hammers at you, and you'd have to know how to navigate through them. But they were smart. They'd constantly be going, moving up and moving down, so that you'd be hitting certain blocks and all this crazy stuff. But it was a well-made game. The graphics were top of the line, probably beyond top of the line at the time. And on top of that, you could play Duck Hunt with your Zapper. Any kid wanted that. I think every kid I can remember either wanted it or had it. So, fast forward a couple years, sometime later, Christmas comes around for me, and Nintendo announces that they're going to release a handheld system. And I'm just like beyond elated on this one. Because by that point, I had had a lot of Mario Karts and stuff, a lot of game carts. Because not only were they releasing, Mario, Super Mario Bros., but I was getting other games. By that point, games like Dr. Mario had come out. Games like, or even, there were even games I remember playing on cousins' systems and stuff like that, where, like Punch-Out with Mike Tyson, where Mario would make a little appearance as the referee and stuff. It was just things like that. I mean, very quickly, when because Nintendo had basically put Mario as a pack-in game with that, the two's fates were perfectly merged together. Nintendo forever became known as the Mario property. And Mario became well known as the Mario property. Mario love took off. Beyond took off. I mean, it ended up with their own regular television cartoon show that would play every weekday. And I remember they used to have guests like Ernie Hudson on it, which was awesome. There were Mario cereal, Mario shampoo. You could get Mario shampoo pretty much at any supermarket. You're going to say, was this stuff rare? No, this stuff was not rare at all. Everyone likes to talk about a day when Nintendo ruled the world. I mean, nowadays, if I find something, I got to go to one particular store to find anything about it. Mario was everywhere. You could go to any supermarket and pick up Mario shampoo, for example. I am not even joking about that. Or Mario cereal. Or you could turn on any of the broadcasts they had on the broadcast stations. The Mario the Mario Super Show in syndication, which would be on, I don't know, your local affiliate or something like that. So everyone was getting exposed to it. By the way, I stopped watching the Mario show when it turned to Club Mario. I don't know if anybody remembered that, but I just remember loving the Mario skits and everything else. And then one day, they changed it to a Club Mario format. And I'm like, what the heck is this? I feel really bad about it because it kind of seemed like that they kind of switched it, because I was a kid at the time. I don't remember how old I was exactly, but I remember being a really young kid and liking the format that they had originally with the Super Mario Brothers Super Show and Lou Albino, the wrestler and everybody else. That I thought worked. But when they switched it over to Club Nintendo, it seemed like, or Club Mario or something like that, where it was like almost like a bunch of surfer dudes with a big screen projector or something like that, talking about satellite surfing and stuff. Like, what the heck is this? Where's Mario? Where's Luigi? And stuff like that. I don't know. I guess they kind of switched overnight from like a kid demographic to a teenager demographic, and I don't think that the teenager. I don't know. It just kind of seemed like that it aged too fast for me, so I stopped watching. And I don't. In fact, I don't even think that anybody kept those tapes. I heard that the original Club Mario tapes got deleted or destroyed or something like that. So I think that probably if you did a search, you might be able to find some clips or something on YouTube, but those are probably VHS reprintings and stuff. I don't think anybody looks back on that series with fond memories unless they were probably a teenager at the time, or looking back on it, I guess, to have a good view of the 90s. Because it was the 90s. People were trying to be hip and edgy and stuff like that by that point. Certainly around 93 or so. Everything was about hip and edgy and cool and bro and all that other stuff. Ah, good times. So as I was going off on that tangent, Nintendo announces that they're going to do our handheld. And by that point, set the stage, Nintendo had pretty much was ruling the world at that point. And it was called the Game Boy. So, like any kid, I asked for a Game Boy for Christmas. In fact, I remember that the Game Boy was a pretty good deal when it came out, because when you bought an original Model 1 Game Boy, you wouldn't just get a Game Boy by itself. You'd get a copy of Tetris packed in, and Tetris was probably one of the most popular games and addictive games for the NES system, so you'd have a portable copy of Tetris to play with. You'd also get a link cable with it, so you could link up your Game Boy physically with a friend's Game Boy, so you could play a two-player game that way. And they also released other games at launch, and one of them was Super Mario Land. I got a Game Boy for Christmas, original Model 1 Game Boy for Christmas, with a copy of Super Mario Land, as well as everything that came with it. And to this day, I probably think that Super Mario Land is probably one of my favorite Mario games, if not my favorite Mario game. It's the one Mario game back in the day that I was able to beat. I loved that game. I did. And I was able to beat it back in the day. I don't know. It was just a really fun system. It was a fun system to play with. You could take it anywhere. Battery life lasted quite a while. It took 4 AA batteries, which was pretty ubiquitous at the time. It would last, last I heard, I think that the original Model 1 would probably have battery life of about 10 hours or something like that in a set of AA's. That was pretty good. And because of that, it didn't come with a charge cable. Like nowadays, like all these systems come with like internal batteries and charge cables and stuff like that. You could buy an AC adapter separately. There is a plug-in for an AC adapter, but it didn't come with one. And I can't remember. I think they were expensive at the time, but I never got one. I never got like an AC adapter. I heard that nowadays, like pretty much there were certain cell phone adapters and stuff like that that would be compatible with it. I think at one point I ended up getting something that was compatible, but I remember that the compatible part, if I shook it slightly, it would lose the connection to the power basically. And I never liked the third-party adapter that I got. I'm sure the original Nintendo adapter didn't have that problem, but the third-party adapter that I had back in the day, if you shook it slightly, it would lose a connection with the system and immediately stop. It would reset, and you'd lose your game progress. Batteries were fine, keep batteries. But here was the thing: I never got any more games for the system. I did get more NES games, but I never got any more Game Boy games because I was a kid. I couldn't afford them. Game Boy games, if I remember at the time, were probably just as expensive as NES games. And I didn't travel that much as a kid. And when I did, I was fine just taking Tetris or Mario Land with me. I never played Metroid as a kid, although nowadays I do play it now. So I never played that, and I never picked up Metroid 2 or anything like that. And I never picked up I never really played any of the other stuff. I remember playing with a friend. My friend had a bunch of copies of games back then. I remember they were doing a lot of like re-releases and stuff like that for the handheld platform. I kind of figured at the time, just get the NES version. Just get the NES version. Don't even worry about the Game Boy version because the NES version will be superior. And in most cases, it was. It wasn't until later that I realized that they ended up getting some pretty exclusive games, but I couldn't afford the original exclusive games. And so I just asked my folks for like the NES versions of games and stuff like that. Nowadays, looking back on it, I can probably kick myself for that, but you're a kid, you don't know these kind of things. But back to how much I love Super Mario Land. I don't know what it was, but I don't know. That was I thought a perfect type of game for me. The levels were a lot of fun. It actually gave the user a lot of chances, I guess because they realized that it was a portable game that somebody's going to want to play on the go, but not for very long stretches. Give the guys a lot of lives, and don't have too many good levels. I think there were only 4 worlds in the game, and there were 3 levels per world, with 2 of those being special levels. And I can remember every time I got to those special levels, there was one in the middle of the game where Mario piloted a submarine, and there was one at the end of the game where Mario piloted an airplane. I remember when I was a kid getting to the underwater level thinking, oh my god, this is awesome! All I wanted was to just play that level over and over again. That was, I think, again, the first time that we'd ever seen Mario do that. So meanwhile, Mario was still doing quite well on the NES because Mario 2 came out, and I never got that game, and I'm actually glad I never got that game because Mario 2 wasn't really Mario 2. I mean, Mario 2 was pretty much Mario the Lost Levels in Japan. And it was Super Mario Brothers, but it was really a harder version of Super Mario Brothers. It was a lot harder. I think that was the first game that brought in poison mushrooms and just all kinds of other stuff. It was hard. And I guess from what I was told, the Japanese developers, Nintendo, thought it was just too hard to bring over. But there was another game in Japan that had come out called Doki Doki Panic or something like that. And they took that game and replaced the characters with Mario characters. And they called it Mario 2 in the United States. I never picked up that game. I never played it. I think I played it once over over another friend's house, and just thinking, this is not Mario. This is not a Mario game. I don't know what this is, but this is not a Mario game. And I had already been this was at a time when I had already played Mario 3, for example. And then Mario 3 came out. And, well, what do you think I'm asking for Christmas? I was in kindergarten at the time when Mario 3 came out. I didn't get it day and date because I couldn't, again, but I did remember getting it for Christmas. And thinking, this game is probably one of the most fun games I've ever played. And it was hard, too. I mean, it was really hard. I don't think I could ever make it past, like, the third level or something like that. The third world or something like that. It was a hard game. Also, I think the first time I ever really got exposed to it was I remember picking up a copy of Nintendo Power, and they had, in that particular issue, the tips and strategies for like the first two worlds of Mario. I'm sorry, of Mario 3. And you had all new kinds of power-ups, and you had all new kinds of graphics, an improved graphics system. Mario 3 was probably, that was it for a lot of people. And that was it for me, because I thought that was great. That was probably, I thought they had perfected it, the best that they could possibly make the Nintendo platform. And to this day, this is probably considered to be probably the best. Super Mario Bros. 3 was probably considered to be, by many accounts, the best NES game ever released. Eclipsing Mario 1. Mario 1 is also on that list, but I believe that most of the lists that I've seen have basically established that Mario 3 was probably better than Mario 1. It was longer, it had more power-ups, the levels, everything else. It was a whole new kind of game. So, Mario's on the Game Boy, Mario's on the NES, everything is taking over. And then the Mario movie comes out in '93. And I remember I asked my folks, could we go see it? I think I went to go see it with my father, my sister, and myself. I don't think my mother went to go see it. She might have, but I don't think she did. I think it was just me, my father, and my sister. And my sister didn't care about video games or anything like that. And my father probably just wanted to go, because, went to go see it because he wanted to go see it with me, I guess. My father would never really play any of the Mario platform games, although he could. But he loved playing Tetris and Dr. Mario. I remember him telling me at that point that he would play those games so much he would actually have dreams with them. So the Super Mario Bros. Movie comes out because everyone knows it was a huge, huge advertising blitz about this. I mean, we're seeing this like, oh, it's cool, it's hip, it's edgy, it's dark, it's interesting. And I'm a kid and I'm thinking, it's Mario though. Gotta go see it. And I do. And by the way, I had never even heard about the Wizard until later in life. So I don't know about that. I remember that a lot of people probably were convinced about the Wizard or something along those lines. I don't even remember even hearing about the movie The Wizard back in the day. So either it never showed over here or I just never saw an advertising blitz for it. But I definitely remember the advertising blitz for the Super Mario Bros. Movie. But I do not remember any media blitz at all for The Wizard or anything along those lines. I didn't even know The Wizard existed until a couple of years ago when the Angry Video Game Nerd reviewed it. I have seen it. I thought it wasn't bad. I didn't think it was bad. I think they broadcast it on like Showtime or Cinemax or HBO or something. I didn't think it was a bad movie. But I didn't see it as a kid. But the Super Mario Brothers movie I did see as a kid. And I know everyone universally makes a joke about trashing this movie, how bad it is and how bad the acting is. I remembered on Mario Weekend, I wrote an entire a couple of paragraphs after I had posted up a link to the Nostalgia Critics review of the Mario Brothers movie, and saying, I like that movie. I did. I like the Super Mario Brothers movie. I never got a copy of it. I never got a copy of it on VHS. I never got a copy of it on DVD or anything, and I don't think they released a Blu-ray, but if they do release a Blu-ray, I'll pick it up. But I remember watching it, I saw it in theaters. I rented it a couple of times as a kid on VHS, and I remembered, I think maybe 10 years ago or something like that, I think they started putting it a lot on HBO Family. So I remember watching it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that movie. I mean, you can say how bad the concept behind it is and how unlike the video games it is. But here's a movie with Dennis Hopper, Bob Hoskins, pre-Pest, John Leguizamo, Samantha Mathis, Fisher Stevens, Dennis Hopper. I mean, can you get... Even if these guys are phoning in, which I think they were. In fact, I think Bob Hoskins later on, like 10 years later, like '07 or something like that, was saying how bad an experience he was having. He'd get drunk or something like that before takes. Even drunk, John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins do amazing takes. I hate to break this to you. He's just one of, I mean, Bob Hoskins, this was the star of movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and stuff like that. Bob Hoskins cannot be bad in a movie. It's just not in him. He's one of the best actors I've ever seen in my life. Same goes for, I mean, I love Samantha Mathis. I admit I never saw, my favorite movie, one of my favorite movies of all time was Pump Up the Volume that she did with Christian Slater. She was amazing in that. I think that was like her first movie. She is great. She is beyond great. Samantha, if you're listening to this, I doubt it, but you are a fantastic actress. I thought she did a great job in the movie. Even with just a simple thing, just a simple. And in case you guys are curious why they were calling her Daisy instead of Princess Peach, even though kind of obvious she was Princess Peach. At the time, this movie was released after. The Game Boy version of I believe Super Mario Land had come out, and it was Princess Daisy that Mario was saving in Super Mario Land, and I guess that's why she was called Daisy, was because Super Mario Land was like the last game that had come out. So they kept it with that. I don't know. I like the movie. I liked everything about it, and to this day, if I ever see somebody with a bomb. Because they make those, nowadays you can like get one of those little toy bombs or something like that, those little wind up toys. Or I think Princess Angel's roommate had like a one that she used to hold candy, and I remembered running and screaming from it, just as a joke because of how everyone treated it in that movie when you saw it. Here's this little wind up toy or something like that, and when everyone sees it in the movie, they just start screaming, and even Koopa was scared. He wasn't running, but he was scared. You could tell he was scared looking at it. Yeah. That was... To this day, I do... If I see somebody with one of those little toys, I run screaming from it. Which was... I don't know. I just think that's awesome. Okay, I just realized that I've gone over 40 minutes, and I haven't even got it out of the NES generation. Yeah, as you can tell, I have a lot to say about this subject, and there's a lot of history there just in that. But I'm going to kind of speed up a little bit, because this is pretty much where I took a break from Nintendo. I remembered getting a Sears catalog, I think it was 1992 or so, and seeing the Super Nintendo in there and thinking, what the heck is this? And then Nintendo started sponsoring things on like the ABC network for the Super Nintendo, and thinking, oh my god, this is amazing. And I even remember some people telling me about, they were hearing rumors about, just on the schoolyard during recess, this game called Super Mario World, which was coming out, and they were calling it Super Mario 4 for, simplicity's sake and stuff like that. But I never had a Super Nintendo. I think they were like $200 at launch. There was no way my folks could have afforded that for me. I never asked for one. I mean, I don't think I might have asked for one, but I never got one. I could never afford one. And that's when I pretty much entered what I think was like a dark age of gaming. Because at that point, I think I was done with the consoles for a while. My sister had a Sega Genesis, but we only really played the Sonic games on it. I remembered playing Super Mario World, at least a few levels of it, over a family friend's house. I used to have to stay over a family friend's house a couple of days a week because my folks wouldn't be home after school until later. And so I'd always stay over a family friend's house, and they had a Super Nintendo, and they had Super Mario World. They had a good version of Home Alone. Everyone likes to say that Home Alone was one of the worst games ever made. It very well may be, but the Super Nintendo version I remember was really good, actually. And if you're going to tell me that that's a bad game, that would surprise me. But they had that. They had a few other games, but really all I remember, they had a Final Fantasy game. They also had Legend of Zelda. Just basically that. But I always remembered playing Super Mario World on it, and I think I get up to like the second world or something like that, and just getting stuck at the Ghost Mansion. I never was able to figure out like the second or third Ghost Mansion, and since I could never beat that mansion, the mansions were the save points, so I could never save. So I'd have to replay the whole world again, and eventually I just gave up. Yeah. Yeah, those were my memories. I mean, I remember also taking a look at some of the later levels because I remember that they had beaten it. But I was just thinking, wow, this is a complex level. This is really, really difficult. And again, I never had a Super Nintendo, so I never played Super Mario World. I know that some people would argue that Super Mario World was better in a lot of ways than Super Mario Bros. 3. I can't imagine how that could be possible. I think Super Mario Bros. 3 is just so classic, and no matter how good Super Mario World was. I know nowadays games like the new Super Mario Bros. U is taking a few pages from the design of Super Mario World. In particular, the level select design and stuff like that really looked like something out of Super Mario World. But then again, you could argue that that's just the evolution of the whole property. So again, I took a break from it, and then but Super Mario Bros. Super Mario World was a huge step up because that was a launch title for the Super Nintendo. It probably at launch sold a lot of those consoles. Obviously, there were some other great games that came out for the Super Nintendo, but Super Mario World was probably the big one, and then that generation was like slowing down, and a bunch of years passed, and I know that there were spin-off games like Mario is Missing and stuff like that, but I never even heard of those games. I know some people like to talk about games like Mario is Missing and Mario Time Machine. I never even heard of those games when they come out. I don't remember anybody talking about them. I don't remember anybody advertising them. I don't remember them in the stores. I don't remember anything like that. So when I found out like games like that existed, I was shocked and surprised because I had never heard of them and I had never seen them as a kid, and I had seen plenty. I never saw them in like an issue of Nintendo Power or anything like that, certainly. But then again, I didn't read it that much. So after all of that done, Nintendo kind of waited a while to get into, once the Super Nintendo generation happened, Nintendo was kind of waiting for a while. This might have had something to do with the fact that the CD-based add-on that never materialized, but they devoted some time and resources to that. But what was probably going to be the big thing was that they kind of were going a bit ahead because the plans were coming for the Nintendo 64. But the thing was that the other systems, the other developers, like Sega, for example, was already out with their CD expansion. The TurboGrafx 16 had already come out with their CD expansion. Even though, let's face it, the TurboGrafx 16 never did very well in this country, or if you prefer to call it by its normal name, which my guy had, which one of my writers on the site had, it was the PCFX, if I remember correctly, was what it was called in Japan. It's the TurboGrafx 16 here. But that had its CD expansion. But the Super Nintendo never got any of that. None of that ever happened. And then the CDI came out, and they had that Mario game for it. Never played it. Although I do remember the CDI seeing that in stores. There was a really good chain. There was a really good store that opened over here that I very remember fondly. It closed down, and I wrote about it in the There Will Be Missed. I'm sorry, You Will Be Missed. And it was a store called Lechmere. And I did some research on it recently, and they all said the same thing, is that the store never really branched out past the Northeast. But when it was built over here and when they brought the store in, the store was beyond fantastic. That was a store I remember where I saw all the original technology, a lot of which didn't really stick around. But this was back in the heyday of the CD-ROM days, or the PC CD-ROM days. And any type of new technology, I remember seeing demoed over there all over the place. You'd see demo kiosks for the 3DO, and you'd see demo kiosks for the CDI. And I remember one day at Lechmere seeing a demo kiosk for the Nintendo Virtual Boy. Yes. And the game that they had on it was Wario Land. Now, shortly towards the end of the Game Boy lifespan, there were 2 sequels released, as far as I can remember, for Super Mario Land on the Game Boy. One was Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins, and like I said, I never picked up any of these games because, how do I put this? I never picked them up because I never had I just couldn't afford the games. The Game Boy games were, as far as I remember, just as expensive as Nintendo games, so I never picked those up, and I remember they were released at bad times, and I never picked them up. And the third one was Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3, where Wario was the bad guy, and I think that was like the first time that anybody had seen Wario, and it was on the handheld console. Now, I admit that the handheld games actually did bring in new characters. Some of them didn't stick, like Tatanga, but I remember Tatanga. I liked Tatanga, and Tatanga is probably more going to be forever immortalized, not just in the original Super Mario Land game, but probably the the Game Boy comic that Linkara reviewed. I never read that comic as a kid, but Linkara, I loved your review of that comic. That really brought back some fond memories of playing Super Mario Land. And finally, what had happened was that the Virtual Boy's launch title, or I think one of the original Virtual Boy launch titles, was the Wario game. I think it was called Wario Land, if I remember correctly. And that was probably, if not the best, considered probably at least the only either good or halfway decent game on the system. Because I remember using it at the demo kiosk, and the way that they had it set up over at Lechmere was that they had it on a table that was just at the right height, so you could be standing up, and the Virtual Boy, you could adjust its height settings, and you could stand up, you could put your head in the eye holes while standing, grab the controllers, and it was just perfect. Really, I think that would have worked best for the Virtual Boys. If you put it on like a high shelf or something like that, or a higher desk, it would work probably best. I think those were like the best ways you could use a Virtual Boy. So that's the way Lechmere had it set up. And I remember playing Wario Land on it and thinking, well, this is kind of cool. This is kind of quaint. I mean, I understand the technology is only red, is totally red, but you can make out the sprites, you can make out the images. I like the use of the depth of field, where you could like go backwards and you can go forwards and stuff like that into 3D. In like it's like a 2 it's like two planes of dimension, even though it's a flat game. I thought it was kind of a fun little platformer from what I played. I mean, it was nothing groundbreaking or crazy, but I thought it was kind of interesting at least. But I never bothered with the Virtual Boy, and let me tell you, that kiosk didn't last very long because the Virtual Boy didn't last very long. The thing pretty much just flew off the shelf completely, was removed from the shelves before I certainly had a chance to get one. And I certainly don't remember ever seeing one at, like, I don't know, a really low price or something like that on the shelves. I just remember one day they were on the shelves, and one day they weren't on the shelves anymore, and nobody was talking about them. So, yeah. So, after all of that, talk about the next generation was coming out. Sony had its PlayStation, Sega had the Saturn, and everyone knew that Nintendo was going to be coming out with Mario game. But everyone was kind of waiting on that. And then the Nintendo 64 launched, which probably had some of the best graphics of that generation. But they had severely crippled themselves by sticking to the proprietary carts. Now, say what you will about that decision, because I remember by about the time that I got back into the console race, this was around 1999 or 2000. I specifically remember choosing a PlayStation because I had heard about the limitations with the game cartridges. And this was something that Sony was greatly holding over Nintendo. However, let's face it, Nintendo always had the share of the first-party games. There was going to be no doubt about that whatsoever. Nintendo was going to rule that, was going to rule with their first party. And at launch, Nintendo had only 2 games available for the Nintendo 64. Even though the Nintendo 64 was the last console to hit the market, they only launched with 2 games. Pilot Wings? No. Was it Pilot? I think it was Pilot Wings. It was like Pilot Wings 64 and Mario 64. Now, what can you say? What can I say about Super Mario 64? What can I say about that game? There is nothing that I can say about that game. Because trust me, it is written down. It is forever immortalized by every game critic in history as one of the definitive games of our lifetime. There's nothing that I can say about that game. There's just nothing. To be perfectly honest, I haven't played it. So maybe that's another reason why. But the game was, of course, re-released on the Nintendo DS and was a huge early DS system seller. So that just goes to say, when you have a game that is so good that it actually sells on 2 platforms, and again, years after the fact. So, yeah. Yeah. So the Nintendo 64 comes out. It's not a total flop, but it is considered to be a disappointment because it was at a bad time. Everyone was kind of expecting that the Nintendo 64 was with its superior hardware and the first party backing of Nintendo was probably going to be the number 1 console of that generation. The PlayStation beat it. The PlayStation was number 1, and I remember my writer who covered this on I believe it was Console War number 3 that we had on the site. It was very surprising. I don't even think the numbers were close. Sony had it by a couple million at least. So, Nintendo really had to take a look back, basically, for what was going on. But they knew, and I think everyone knew, that Nintendo would always have Mario on their back. Nintendo would always have, even if they had a bad system, a Nintendo game would still be something that could turn something that was a complete failure into something that would be viable. This was probably the first time that Nintendo had really dealt with defeat like that. Some people would argue that they had lost the previous generation to Sega and they had lost the next generation to Sony. I don't think so. I don't think that I would consider the Sega versus the Super Nintendo versus the Sega Genesis. I would consider that one a draw. You could probably argue one way or another who had the more sales, but overall, it seemed to be a draw, split right down the middle. And I'll take that bet. I'll take it. It was a draw, and that'll be the end of it. If somebody was to put a bet on either side, I basically say both of you get to keep your money. The second time, though, for the Sega Genesis, for the Sega Saturn, the Nintendo 64, and the Sony PlayStation generation, everyone would probably say it was the PlayStation hands down, and I would not disagree with that either. It was PlayStation number 1, Nintendo 64 was number 2, and the Saturn was the far 3. Was the far third place. But here was the thing about it. Nintendo wasn't completely, like I said, Nintendo still had revolutionized everything. They had produced the best graphics of that generation, easily. They had pushed gameplay to the third dimension quite well. They made a very good evolutionary transition between the 2D and the 3D generations. I mean, a lot of people would argue that second and third place the second and third D generation leap was a harsh one to a lot of people because there were some developers out there that were basically stuck to making 2D games, and they had perfected by that point a 2D game. By the time they had access to this third dimension with the new graphical powerhouse, everyone was at a loss about what to do with it. Everyone. Not Nintendo. Nintendo had it. Nintendo knew what to do with it. They were ready. Certainly their first party was. And, yeah. So, Nintendo definitely, it wasn't a failure for them, because I think that Mario 64 on its own merit alone was probably something that pretty much wrote the rule book for what would be a 3D platformer. Everyone still cites that game even to this day. And I can't take that away from Nintendo, and I won't. So, you had another generation coming. With the Nintendo GameCube, the Sony PlayStation 2, and the Microsoft Xbox. Original Xbox. And here was the problem. For the first time ever, a Mario game was not ready at launch. This was a big deal. This was a really big deal. Nobody thought that this would happen. Something like this would happen. And the GameCube, when it came out, fizzled quite quickly. It had not followed the rules. I mean, the GameCube had superior power graphically. Certainly superior power in a lot of ways to, past the PS2. Probably not superior power graphically to the Xbox, but, that's neither here nor there. It didn't have a solid Mario game at launch to back it up. And by this point, the market had flooded. You had three people, you had three consoles on the market. And Microsoft had Halo at launch. By that point, the PS2 had, the Metal Gear games. Nintendo without Mario was lost almost. I honestly don't believe that the GameCube really picked up until Metroid Prime came out. Certainly after Metroid Prime got a price drop. So there's that to say, at least. But the thing about it is, they had a game, they did finally get their Mario game, Super Mario Sunshine. And there were other Mario games that came out for the platform. They had a Paper Mario game came out around the same time as Metroid Prime 2. They were really starting to take into account for these extra Mario games. I mean, by the time of the Super Nintendo, Mario had kind of branched out a lot to other platforms than just platformers. And Nintendo was basically creating whole new properties to support them, because I think they realized by that point that this was their mascot, and they had to really, they had to have more than just one title for it. They had to have multiple ones. There was never really a Super Mario World 2 or a Mario World 2, but I mean, let's face it. There was this for the Super Nintendo. It had the paper, the Super Mario RPG, which did really well. By the time the N64 came out, when the N64 was out, it had not just the Mario 64 game, but also the first Paper Mario game, which had that wonderfully awesome, funny commercial for it. It had, and it had Super Smash Brothers, which featured Mario. It also was the first to, I believe the N64 was the first game to introduce the Mario Party series. So, Mario was starting to really shred his stuff by about the time of the N64 generation. By the time of the GameCube generation, Nintendo, maybe because it was a little late to the party on that console for the standalone Mario game, started releasing because the GameCube did have Luigi's Mansion, the very first Luigi's Mansion game. Can I say to this day I am really disappointed I do not have a copy of that game. I really wish I did, because that game has pretty much standard, a lot of people didn't like it when it came out, but everyone kind of looks back fondly on that game right now, and it does have its own place in Nintendo Land for the Wii U, and it also has a new game coming out exclusive to the 3DS. The Luigi's Mansion 2 is coming out to the 3DS at some point. I would love if they re-released Luigi's Mansion just as like an updated version for the for the Wii or the Wii U. I would love that. Or if they decided around the same time as the Luigi's Mansion 2 game comes out to release Luigi's Mansion along with Luigi's Mansion 2, like have it as like an extra feature in the game or something, because that'd be awesome. Because right now copies of Luigi's Mansion go for like $80-90. Can't afford that. Really can't. Heck, Super Mario Sunshine probably goes for like 70, $80. And a lot of people didn't like that. And of course, let's not forget, there was also the Mario Kart series, which is just to go to show that this is infinitely flexible. It started with Super Mario Kart for the Super Nintendo. And I think that really the Mario Kart formula hit its perfect stride, or at least started to hit its perfect stride, when it hit the Nintendo 64 generation. Because with Mario Kart, I remember that my first experiences playing Mario Kart was when I used to go to the orthodontist. Oh, God, that was a horrible experience. I would not wish braces on my worst enemy. I honestly, to this day, would say that I'd be able to be fine if I ever got tortured, because I would just simply say, do your worst. I've had braces. Nothing you could possibly do to me. Oh, electricity? Are you kidding me? You know, there's no intense pain more than the pain of having braces. I'm sorry, but there certainly wasn't. I could laugh in the face of some torturer because I had that. But I can remember the only positive memories of that experience were that my orthodontist had a Nintendo 64 in his office that I used to play while I was waiting for my appointment to start. And Mario Kart was a game that they usually had on the rotation. And that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to play that. So when the time of the GameCube came around, fueled by the fact of Metroid Prime being so good, I actually picked up a GameCube. But for the life of me, I think I really missed out, because other than the Metroid games, I did pick up Paper Mario. I did pick up the GameCube version of Paper Mario. But I never really picked up any of the other games. I never picked up Mario Kart Double Dash, although I sure played a lot of it. I played a lot of it with my friend Otacon, because he loved that game, and that was a lot. We'd play that together. That was a lot of fun. It was also one of the first games that really made use of the network adapter for the GameCube. Granted, it was local play only. It did not support online play, but with a few jerry rigs through a system, you could probably get online play working. You just need some kind of computer to act as some other kind of some kind of a few separate GameCubes or something. You'd use that to be your tunnel into the internet, through the internet to get local play. But yeah, Mario Kart Double Dash was like one of the very few games that actually made use of the GameCube network adapter. Not even Metroid Prime 2 made use of that, and that had multiplayer, but it was local only on the 4 controllers. So, I don't know. I think Mario Kart was probably... What can I say about Mario Kart? I mean, those games were just perfect. I mean, kart racing, sure, but they were so much fun to play. I mean, the tracks were a lot of fun. The kart handling was great. It was smooth, fluid. It was action. It was fair. It was well balanced. But I never had an N64 growing up. I know, I'm going to say this a lot. I never had this, I never had that. But I did get a GameCube. So, sometime around the Wii comes out. Now, you guys can say what you will about the Wii coming out. I didn't get a Wii until around, I think it was the same time, probably the same day that Grand Theft Auto 4 came out. 2 years after the launch of the console. I had steady work. And what had happened was that I was in Best Buy for Grand Theft Auto 4. And I was cracking jokes about the line. Line for a big game release, big freaking whoop. That's nothing. And the clerk at Best Buy told me, nice guy, I haven't seen a line like this since the Wii launch. And I just started laughing as if it was a joke, because I had never seen a Wii. It was supposedly, the Wii was out for 2 years by this point. I had never seen one. I had not seen one on shelves. I had never heard of anyone getting one. Apparently, these things were selling so fast that you couldn't find them on shelves anywhere. By that point, 2 years into a console cycle, if Nintendo couldn't meet the demand to at least have the product on shelves, I considered it vaporware or some kind of joke. Like, oh yeah, the Wii exists only on paper or something like that. I guarantee you that's a big joke that Nintendo was playing on us or something. I was really jaded at that point. And the clerk told me, no, we've got some in the back. I said, you're kidding. He's like, no, we got them in the back. They're not on the shelves yet, but we've got them in the back. He's like, you want one? He's like, are you kidding me that you could sell me a Wii right now? He's like, yeah. Yeah, yeah. If you want one, you got the money. You give me the money. I'll sell you one. And I did right there. I plunked down the money. I said, you know what? Sell me a Wii. 90% of the reason why I got that Wii, by that point, pretty much most of the major games for it had already come out. Super Smash Brothers version had already come out. I don't think the Mario Kart game came out yet. I could be wrong about that one. Metroid Prime 3 had come out, which was the one game that I really wanted. Super Mario Galaxy was out. I'll talk about that later. No More Heroes was out and wasn't selling very well. I had to get that one. And Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was out. So within 2 or 3 days of picking up a Wii, I already picked up like a stack of about 6 good games for it. Full price games too. A component adapter. Extra controller, extra nunchuck. Basically, yeah. Hooked it up and loved every second of it. And part of the and actually one of the other and I actually was buying Wii points for it as well, because not only was the Wii capable of playing GameCube games at launch, it also had the Virtual Console, and that to me was like a good 90% of the reason why I was buying that game. Buying that game console, because Nintendo was smart enough to realize is like they had a huge library of games that you couldn't get anymore. The carts wouldn't work on the new consoles, but you still wanted to be able to play them on modern TVs, on modern tech. You want to keep your old NES constantly, they're connected, collecting dust. Angry video game nerd aside. What they did instead was they had the Virtual Console. This was, as far as I'm concerned, one of the smartest moves that Nintendo has ever made, period. Short of bundling Wii Sports probably with the Wii. Because you had one of the best back catalogs of first-party games on the most healthiest and awesome spectrum of game consoles of our lifetimes. Yes, re-release those games. Make them play exactly as they played. I remember before that weekend was over, I had already... Because I had missed out on the Super Nintendo generation, the Nintendo 64 generation, and because I had to give up my NES with a lot of the games for it, I couldn't play those games anymore. I wanted to play those games again. And I remembered picking up a Wii, picking up some Wii points, and downloading every single game that I could get my hands on that I remembered or wanted to play from my childhood. Either the games that I remembered from my childhood or the games that I missed out on playing from my childhood. And I can remember playing, or downloading, I should say, the first game I think I downloaded, I'm sure many of the first ones that everybody downloaded, was probably Super Mario Brothers. I also downloaded Super Mario Brothers 3, and that was just the start. I also remember downloading games from the N64 era, like Super Mario 64, Cruis'n USA. From the Super Nintendo, of course, Super Mario World. Gosh. There's Metroid 3, or Super Metroid, if you will. And, of course, all the Legend of Zelda games I can get my hands on. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link. And, of course, what was that last one? Link to the Past. Getting basically Majora's Mask came later. Wasn't available when I had it. So, yeah, there was that. Smart move, Nintendo. Really smart move. My one disappointment was that they didn't release the Game Boy games. You couldn't get the Game Boy games on that, but they made it nice because they released the Virtual Console and made the GameCube games available for the 3DS. So, I guess they said, you know what, the games were made for a handheld. Let's wait till we have a handheld platform. So, you know what, let them have it. You know, it's fine. The games are all out on the 3DS right now. My one complaint is that they don't have the Pokemon game on, or any of the Pokemon Gen 1 games on. That they really need to put on the 3DS, and I really can't fathom what's the hold up on that one. But that all aside, you know, Super Mario Land is now back, and after 20 years, I downloaded Super Mario Land to my 3DS, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Super Mario Galaxy was the major launch title. Well, not really launch title, but the launch window game for the Wii. And I remember that when people were talking about it, and this was, in the wake of Super Mario Sunshine being a disappointment, I remember distinctly a lot of people saying, well, what are they going to do with this game? They didn't really think too much of it, especially given the fact that it wasn't a launch title. This was the big thing I remember, was that the development code, the code word for the game when it was coming out was Mario 128. That got some heads surprising. Like, are they going to try to make this game like a evolution beyond what the Mario 64 game was? And I remembered on the Wii, when I played that game, I just remember so fondly trying to get every star I could. That game was a ton of fun. Super Mario Galaxy was the first new Mario game that I had played in forever, and I just remembered it was like I was a kid again. I was having a blast. I loved Super Mario Galaxy. I could not believe how fun it was. I remembered I was trying to get every star I possibly could in a lot of the early levels and stuff like that, and trying to complete all the galaxies and everything that I could. But I don't know, at some point when I got to the point where I was just like having so much trouble with a lot of the comets and stuff like that, the trickster comets and stuff, I was just like, no, I can't keep playing. It's like I saved Luigi, and I had to, oh god, I can't keep playing. It was tough. I think at some point, I don't know, I think there's like 120 or so, but you can pretty much get it. There's like 120 stars total in the game, but you can pretty much get it at about 60. I think I got to about 80 or so, maybe, and I'm like, you know what, I'll play the end game. And I did, I played the end game. And I beat Bowser. Great. It was fun. I'm sure at some point I'll go back to the game and stuff like that, but for now, I'm fine with it. I enjoyed the game a lot. I picked up Super Mario Galaxy 2, but I never got past the opening. It kind of felt to me like Super Mario Galaxy 2 is pretty much just Super Mario Galaxy 1 with different levels and stuff. And I'm like, I already really played this game. It didn't really feel like it was bringing a new story to the table. It just felt like it was bringing back the same story with new levels. So by this point, Nintendo also comes out with by this point, Nintendo had already come out with the Nintendo DS, which was the successor to the Game Boy, the major successor to the Game Boy. And let's face it, the Nintendo DS was the dominant handheld, beating out the Sony PSP. It launched first, and it was a very successful platform. Not just because of, let's face it, Nintendo had pretty much ruled the roost for handhelds because of their Pokemon games, and that still... that tradition, there was Pokemon, everybody pays attention when Pokemon comes out. But when the DS came out, they also had a lot of other games that were coming out for it. I believe that probably one of the major games that came out was the re-release of Mario 64 for the DS. That was a huge deal for them. For me, if I was to pick up the DS, I was really looking forward to the Metroid Prime Hunters game. Because actually that was a demo for which was the pack-in title for the DS. If you bought an original model DS, you'd get the Metroid demo with it, the Metroid Prime Hunters demo with it. And I distinctly remember Twitch actually got one of those original models. And I asked him, will you sell me that cart? But he won't. Honestly though, I do think that the market value on a copy of one of those is probably around $5 or so. And Twitch wouldn't sell. Well, you are not going to believe this, but this is actually a re-recording, which you're just hearing right now. My last 10 minutes of the podcast got lost. Literally, it just was unrecoverable. And I'm grateful that I was able to get what I could from the podcast, because this is probably going to be my longest podcast ever. But I lost the last 10 minutes of it, and I have to re-record it, actually, for you guys. But from what I understand, from what I left off, and I might have missed one or two things, or I might be repeating one or two things, but as far as I know, I'm leaving off basically with the DS. And really what sold the DS at launch, other than just the Metroid demo, was probably the re-release of Mario 64 for the DS. And that just is a testament to how good Mario 64 was, because here were people plunking down money for it again, for this brand new handheld system, to be playing just on this brand new handheld system. So just as Mario 64 had sold the people on the N64, here was Mario 64 now selling people on the original DS. And the DS was the dominant handheld console of that handheld generation. It beat out the Sony PSP. That's by no means to say that the Sony PSP was a failure, but it never could match the sales with the DS. The DS was just so ubiquitous. It also had a much lower price. But once again, Nintendo's first party was just a shine here. And don't get me wrong, the Nintendo DS saw a slew of fantastic Mario games to come to it, whether it be Mario Kart DS or Bowser's Inside Story, or just there was like even Super Princess Peach, although that technically wasn't a Mario game. It was a great the handheld actually was able to once again become the dominant, just as the Game Boy had, and I think that's just a testament to it. So I really don't want to catch. I think this podcast is getting pretty long to begin with, but I kind of want to follow it up a bit with why do I think that Mario has lived for as long as he has, and why this is going on for so long. I think that this is just a property that endures with every single generation. It's completely flexible. You've got an idea behind an Italian plumber stomping on turtles, and you've got him just, saving a princess. It's a testament to the fact of, whether it be all these new franchises that have split off from just the core franchises, or a testament to the franchises that, whether it be the Paper Mario franchise, the Mario Kart franchise, the new Super Mario Brothers franchise, or the 3D Mario franchise, or anything along those lines. Nintendo can pretty much sell Mario in every single idea that you can have, and just use it, and even they could use them in other respects. You wouldn't do that in a character that just does, can't stand the test of time. And I think that that's absolutely phenomenal. When I remember talking to an uncle of mine who has a Nintendo Wii, and I asked him what was he playing on it, and he said, of course, Wii Sports. And he asked me, he's like, well, what do you play on? And I said, well, I play Mario Galaxy on it. Which is what I was playing at the time. And he said, Mario? Is that still around? I remember Mario. This was not a young man. So, whether you're old or young or, my age or anything else, Mario resonates with every single age group you could possibly imagine. That's just a testament to Shigeru Miyamoto's genius. It's just why. It just answers to everybody. I think the original ideas behind it was like they wanted to make you feel like a kid at heart all over again, or make you feel like a kid. Or if you're a kid, you're having fun, or if you're an older guy or older girl, you feel as if you were a kid again. That's Nintendo's mantra. I don't know if it always worked, but it's worked for me. Worked for me certainly recently. Now, I usually end these podcasts with a talk about where do I think that the future is going to be with this. And really, the Wii U is out. Future's already here. New Super Mario Brothers Wii is out. I'm sorry, New Super Mario Brothers U is out. But there's a lot of franchises. I think that by the time the Wii came out, everyone kind of knew what the formula was for Nintendo. You release the console, you do a Mario game, you do maybe a Mario Kart game, a Super Smash Brothers game, a 3D game, and a Paper Mario game. Nintendo has spent a lot of time creating new franchises for Mario to appear in, and they've done it to fantastic success. And I think the reason why they've been doing this is so they can build up a library so that when they launch a new system, they can have that library ready to go to sell the new system. Now, As this podcast is being recorded, there has been no announcement of a PlayStation 4, and there's been no announcement of a successor from the Xbox of the Xbox 360, not officially. There's been musings and stuff like that, like obviously they're coming, but there have been no official announcements of that. But the Wii successor is out. Let's imagine for a second like a PS4 is coming, or a successor to the Xbox 360. Let's call it an Xbox 720. Let's just imagine for a second that they're coming. Obviously, Nintendo and Sony, Microsoft and Sony are going to have a response to the Wii U in the form of a new console. Let's say, that's what they're doing. How will Nintendo respond if if Microsoft and Sony launch a new console? They're going to respond probably by saying, oh, by the way, this game is coming, or oh, by the way, this game is coming, oh, by the way, this game is coming. Can you imagine how awesome it would be to play Mario Kart on the Wii U controller? You could just imagine having a first-person view on the Wii U controller from the kart and turning the controller like a steering wheel while seeing while seeing the kart in third person, in the third person view on the TV screen. That's beyond awesome. Or you could have one player controlling the kart and they could have the view from the controller, and another player with a Wiimote or a Wii Wheel or a Wii Pro controller or something like that having the TV screen. And they could race against each other that way. That's genius. That's beyond... Okay, I'm patting myself on the back here. I don't mean to be egotistical, but that's possible with the Wii U. And trust me, I've been messing around with the Wii U for 2 weeks now. It could do that. They could do that. It's technically feasible. These things are like no-brainers. I mean, how about a new 3D Mario game? Like, maybe like, I'm not saying it's Mario 128, that's considered Mario Galaxy, but like Mario 256 or something like that. Where you could have some use of the Wii U controller with a 3D Mario character. That would be awesome. Or a new Super Smash Brothers game would be awesome. Or a Paper Mario game would be awesome. Something along those lines. I can imagine easily that they'd be coming. Now, obviously, you could probably argue, well, that would mean probably maybe a Metroid Prime 4 or something like that might also come. Sure. We're all basically... I'm just speculating, and I'll even be the first to announce that it'd be a speculation. But this was speculation based upon 2 or 3 seconds of just ideas. This was not even a hard brainstorm. If it's coming easy to me to come up with these ideas, you can imagine how easy it is to come up with, for when Nintendo is probably working on. Because I guarantee you that the second that if Microsoft or Sony announces that they're going to have something to compete with the Wii U, like a new console that will compete with the Wii U, you can probably just imagine that Nintendo is probably going to say, yeah, but we've already got the Wii U out and we've got all these new games coming out for it. Mario games. I like my Wii U. I'd buy more games. I can't wait to see what second phase Nintendo has in mind. It'd be amazing to see what they have in mind and play more games on this thing. So, I'd like to thank you guys for listening. I think I wrapped it up a little bit shorter than I don't know, it's about 10 minutes. I want to thank you guys for listening again. This is, I'd like to see what the world has in store for the Italian plumber. Until next time, guys, this is Maniac with GameAccess.net. Thanks for listening. Over and out.